Well, hey guys, welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. It's Kimberly and Tim Scott, and we're excited to be with you today. We've had a good little.
Well, we were just a couple of weeks ago.
You just cut me off.
Oh, I
I was
thought you
just
were
saying we've had a good couple of weeks.
We've had a good couple of that, and the reason is because we just had our 17th meeting anniversary.
Yes,
that was fun.
It was fun.
really good.
It's one of my best fall memories because we met on a blind date at Starbucks.
Well, it was sort of blind.
Yeah, it was blind. We had never seen each other before, so we had communicated. And that, let me tell the story, baby.
Okay.
This is your day for the podcast, so I'm going to do the intro.
I see what's going on.
I can control the narrative.
I feel it. I feel the tension. It wasn't that good of a 2 weeks. I'm feeling the tension.
It was a very
feeling
good
the love.
couple of weeks. Actually, it was a very good couple of weeks because we celebrated my birthday and our anniversary in the last couple of weeks. But one of the things that we do every year that's so special is we go back to the very location where we met on our blind date.
We do that.
And we sit at a booth. We bring your old computer, which looks like a dinosaur now.
Hewlett Packard. It's called a laptop, but it's about the size of a regular PC.
Yeah.
It's just massive.
It's massive, yeah.
It's a massive laptop.
And we haven't figured out how to move over the pictures and the
I got a lot of
emails.
tech people in my life. Maybe I can have them work on it.
But we keep dragging it there. 17 years we've been dragging it to this Starbucks. And so we sit there and we reread our emails to each other.
It's
and
nice.
we even talk about like that day, what the weather was, what we were wearing, and our first impressions. And we always end up in a little puddle of tears. Just so
Well,
grateful.
don't say
babe,
that.
You don't
Sounds like a
even
little
pretend.
weakling.
You have the most tender heart of any man I know.
Oh, I do. I'm so tender.
And we had the Starbucks manager come over and asked to take our picture because they were asking questions about it, and we shared what we've been doing, and so they sent it to corporate. So that was really cute.
That was nice.
Story of a blind date. Hey, see, coffee dates can work out.
Yeah, actually, the beauty of coffee dates, if you're dating, just keep this in mind, you can get away without having any kinds of problems. If it's not going well, bail out, drive home. Don't pick anybody up. Just meet there, and then if it's not going well,
It's safe.
to any of you that I may have met at coffee, that was my
I'm
strategy.
sorry, but it
Sorry.
worked.
Didn't work out. Kimberly was the right one. Anyway,
And you've only spent money on a coffee, so you didn't even spend
Not
a
that
lot of
much.
money. Yeah.
well, we the last couple of weeks we're talking about Kimberly 2 weeks ago talked about 5 things she would never do as a mom. I talked about the 5 things I would never do as a dad. Pretty relevant, relatable.
Yeah.
And I got this idea, and I really wanted to do it, and I kind of forced us to do it because I mentioned in the last podcast that we were going to carry this on. Kimberly didn't know that, but we decided that we would do, I decided that we would do 5 things I would never do as a pastor.
Right.
And then I got to realizing, how many pastors do we actually
You
have that
literally-
listen
yes.
to this podcast?
1% of
There's
our audience.
2. There's you and me.
I mean,
A few pastors listen to our podcast, and we're very grateful.
Yes.
Please.
And if you're in that number, thank you.
Thank you
and
very
spread
much.
the word.
But so that was what I was going to first do it on. But we decided, Kimberly told me I had to do this, is
did.
what 5 things I would never do as a spiritual leader. And
There you
we'll
go.
explain that in just a moment.
Yeah.
Somebody said, why 5 things? Well, if you're on social media, you know that there is a, what do they call it? A trend or whatever.
Yeah.
That's going around. That is the 5 things I would never do as a optometrist. 5 things I would never do as a proctologist. No, nobody's done that.
As a mechanic, I mean, there's
would never,
everything.
5 things I
Yeah.
would never do as a proctologist.
Yeah.
The thing I would never do is be a proctologist. But anyway,
It's
moving
interesting that
along.
came to mind.
Yeah, I don't know why. But anyway, so 5 things I wouldn't do as a professional, whatever. Dental hygienist.
Still laughing about the proctologist.
Yeah. It missed you first, so I brought it back around to get you with me on that one. Anyway, so these are the 5 things that I would never do as a spiritual leader. But I wrote down, I saw this guy, we don't come up with all of our stuff on our own. We do some binging. I don't Google, I bing.
Yes.
I looked up about 5 things that pastors should never do or whatever. And this pastor asked his congregation what they would say he should say.
Which is so good.
And
idea.
this is one of them. And then I added 2 of my own. He's a pastor of a medium-sized church. It's not like a mega church pastor. But anyway, he says, never leave your private jet outside the hangar at night. So, like, how many pastors have a private jet? 3. I can give their names too,
No,
but anyway.
don't do that.
All right. Here's 2 that I came up with if I was going to do it on pastors, which we're not. 5 things I would never do as a pastor. This was one. Never keep bodyguard more than a year because you become friends and they lose their
Respect.
ability to protect. And respect.
Your bodyguard.
Yeah, like I have a bodyguard. My bodyguard
I'm
is
your bodyguard.
my dog Biscuit. And Biscuit is a little beagle and not very ferocious. Anyway, and then here's the last one. Never park your Bentley in the pastor's parking space, okay? This space is only used for Mercedes and BMWs.
Yikes.
Okay, I don't have any one of those 3.
You're a truck man.
If you're a pastor that has a Bentley, more power to you. You know what? I don't have a problem with that.
Just don't park it in the pastor's
Just
spot.
don't park it don't flaunt what you got. Anyway, so we talked about that, doing on pastors. How are you going to relate to that if you're not a pastor? So we thought, spiritual leaders, 5 things.
And everybody is. If you're a believer, you're leading someone.
So let me give you the categories for 5 things I would never do as a spiritual leader. One is, for example, a Bible study leader. Mm-hmm. If you're leading maybe you're a pastor, but maybe you're a small group leader in your church, a facilitator, a volunteer. There are spiritual leaders. Think about the spiritual leader that you are in your home. Mm-hmm. For most of you who are parents that listen to this podcast, you're a spiritual leader, and you need to see yourself as a spiritual leader, not just a parent.
And I just want to say, let's take this.
Did you just raise your hand?
I did, because people at home can't see that unless they're watching the video.
Yeah.
Let's take this completely out of the church. If you are a believer in Christ, you are a spiritual leader in every place that your body takes you. So see it from that perspective. We are spiritually leading, whether we recognize it or not. If people know, we know Jesus, even more so. But even if they don't know that we know Jesus, we are spiritually leading.
Now, these should be really relatable to you. And think about this. These 5 things we should never do as spiritual leaders. 5 things I would never do as a spiritual leader. Number 1, I would never violate a confidence. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a caveat to that, or a couple of caveats to that. You got to think about how important it is for you to keep confidences. Mm-hmm. People have come to me, shared many, many private things I've never shared with anybody, including my spouse. Mm-hmm. There are sometimes inappropriate things have been said to me that I do share with my spouse because, that's my protection and that's my responsibility. But let's say some guy comes to me about a confidential issue in his marriage or in his business or his finances. He needs to know I'm not going to share that even with my wife. Mm-hmm. I believe that there are many things that people share with you where they've not said, would you please keep this confidential? Listen to this. You should still keep it confidential. Mm-hmm. People share private things with the idea of a certain level of confidentiality. Now, if they're seeking secrecy,
right,
that's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, don't tell your wife, but I'm attracted to you, or don't tell your husband, I find you attractive. Okay, that's wrong, and you do not keep that confidence.
And I would
that's
say
not a confidence; that's a secret.
I would say that even when it comes to your relationship with your spouse, I would make sure that you're in agreement on that, because otherwise it could feel like secrecy if somebody's disclosing things to you and your wife is on the outside of that. Depending on the topic, by the way, I think it's helpful to be able to tell your spouse if they are safe. And they'll keep it in a lockbox. Because I grew up in a home where my parents were like, we will not ever keep secrets. And then that, they held to that, you know?
Make a distinction. We've already done it, but just to really force home this point, there's a difference between secrecy and confidentiality.
Right. That's good.
Confidentiality is appropriate. Secrecy is not.
Good. Yeah.
If an adult says to a child, let's keep this our secret, that's a problem.
Right.
You don't go to children and do inappropriate things and tell them to keep it secret.
Right.
Or you don't, having a secret like a birthday party that's coming up.
Right.
I hate those things. I want it to be a surprise. No, let's not make this a surprise. Let's tell everybody. Anyway, it drives me crazy. Everybody goes, okay, we're going to do this thing for mom.
A lot of people disagree with you on
Don't
that,
tell
Tim.
me. Oh, I
You're gonna
know.
get
I
mail.
know. This is one of my pet peeves. We got to keep this a secret.
Don't make this on your list because that's just your that's your desire.
That's my problem. I got it. Okay, so.
Wait, we didn't qualify that though. In regard to disclosure, if it's about abuse or unrepentant sin. Okay, I thought you were moving on to two.
No, and we did write this down because I think this is important. The caveat of keeping confidence: when someone is living in sin and is unrepentant, now you need to be very careful not to be sanctimonious in your declaring of people unrepentant. I've been told that I was unrepentant for something that I had repented of, and people didn't like the measure that I shared with them. This was between me and God and me and certain people, whether, if there's something that you've done, you don't have to go expose it to the world to prove your repentance. In fact, oftentimes, most of the time, that's inappropriate. But the exception would also be if someone is abusing a child or abusing their spouse. That is keeping a secret. That's not something that should be kept confidential.
Illegal.
I tell people, there's mandate reporting and so forth. And, as a pastor, I'm a mandated reporter. I don't agree with all those laws. I think some of them are harmful and keep people from getting help. I don't want to get into all the politics of that, but just to say that as a mandating reporter, or if I'm saying that right, I am required by law to share if I know that a child is being abused. What the law thinks abuse is and what I think abuse is are two different things.
Right.
I think scolding a child is appropriate, and there are people that don't. Anyway, so confidentiality for the most part is listening to somebody's private struggle that you are keeping private and keeping that between the two of you. And that doesn't mean that you ignore your responsibility to help them to grow past that. So that's one thing I would never do. Second thing I would never do as a spiritual leader is I would never be an unsafe listener. Now that's kind of goes with the first one because the first thing that people need to know is you're not going to share this with anybody else. The second thing they need to know, and this is really important, listen to this carefully. If you have teenage children, they need to know that they are safe in sharing their failures with you. And what I mean by that is they are not going to get an overreaction. There have been times when our kids have shared stuff with us where I had to bite my tongue.
Yeah.
And there are other things I never knew until they were adults.
Right. They were smart. They had secrets.
Ronnie was not good. Carrie was pretty good. Nicole would tell on herself. She was just our second child. But Ronnie was not good. He's not a good deceiver. Shar was pretty good.
She was pretty good.
Malachi was pretty good. Jesse was not very good either. He
yeah.
just and Gracie was perfect. But whatever. Anyway, but Malachi would say, "Hey, when I was a kid, I did this." I'm like, "Holy cow! I'm glad I didn't know that." But anyway, but somebody needs to know that you are a safe listener. Because listen, relationships, we've said this so many times, relationships are developed, the intimacy of relationships are developed in the context of safety.
Yeah.
So when I share with my wife, I need to know that I'm safe in sharing this. I need to know that she'll keep it confidential, and I need to know that she can handle it. So that's something I would never do as a leader, is create unsafety. Let me be very careful to say, I have made things unsafe. I've kept confidences, but I think there have been times, not often, because I'm pretty careful about this, where I have reacted, and I just could not hold back on my reaction.
Well, welcome
And-
to being a human.
Yeah. So, all right, number 3. Another thing I would never do as a spiritual leader is compare to another leader my life or compete with other leaders. Now, again, I have done that, and that has created more misery for me
Yes.
than other things. Very huge mistake. I listened to another, public speaker, and I go, gosh, why can't I do that? Or a singer, or whatever your talent is, or whatever your greater skill is, or somebody that is such a good counselor. I often hear one side of counseling from my wife. When Kimberly, when you are counseling somebody, I only hear that side, and I'm like, in fact, I just heard it today. You were counseling somebody, and I'm thinking, wow, that's really good. That was a good insight there. And I'm thinking, man, I hope that I have that kind of insight when I share with people. So anyway, but you don't compare. You don't compete.
Right.
If you want to ruin something good, compare it to something else.
Right.
That's a good way to ruin. We say that a lot because
Yeah.
that's a really important
Because
truth.
it's a huge issue in our culture.
And you want to read number 4?
Number
We
4
wrote
is
these
I
down.
would never shame people I lead or that follow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't shame the people you follow
Right.
or the people you lead.
Yeah.
Think about your children. You're leading your children, and if you shame them, you're going to ruin your relationship
right, and that
with
kind
them.
of goes back to the issue of safety and confidence in your leadership.
Absolutely.
So shame is devastating. It's death to a relationship.
Yeah.
And most people who have failed carry so much shame, they don't need you to unload shame on them as well.
The Bible tells us we're supposed to humble ourselves.
Yeah.
And especially humble ourselves before each other, but especially before God. But don't see yourself as on a spiritual gift. Like, I have this spiritual gift of humiliation.
Right.
I can humiliate people well. I'm that guy. Then that means you have no friends. And the
Yeah.
people that you think are your friends tolerate
And
you.
you're not spiritual at all. So
Yeah, that's not spiritual, and they're tolerating you. So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
don't humiliate people. And then
Your last one.
the last one is, as a spiritual leader, I would never pretend to be more spiritual than I am. I have done that, and I'm learning more and more how important that is, not to pretend you're more spiritual than you are. That doesn't mean you have to go and tell everybody all of your sins. What that means is you need to be honest that you're struggling.
An authentic
yeah.
leadership role of the struggles and the highs and the lows.
Yeah, we're part of a network of churches that are community church movement, and it started with Eastlake Church in Chula Vista, a mega church down here where we live, and good friends of ours were pastors there, Carmen and Mike Meeks. And they've really taught us and really emphasized, open the windows, turn on the lights,
Yeah.
make sure the drapes are open, and just be real with people.
Yes.
Again, that doesn't mean you expose everything about your life, but that you're authentic and real. This, when we pretend to be more spiritual than we are, what we do is that pretense causes other people to pretend.
Right.
And then what it does is it puts people on I don't know if the word's a guilt trip, but just an inferiority that they're not as spiritual as you.
Right.
When if they knew you, they'd go, oh, yeah, I'm struggling just like they
Right,
are.
right. And the goal is, as spiritual leaders, is you're wanting them to grow and become spiritually strong. And the key to that is not to live under the burden of, pretense, but to live an authentic life where we do share our brokenness. That was so freeing for us when we recognized that we'd both come from, ministry backgrounds. There's a little bit of like, you don't really, you hold your cards close to your chest. You don't exactly throw it all out there as a leader. And we're not saying to do that, but we are saying that most people cannot relate to your successes as much as they can your failures. And so if you're spiritually leading someone, it's really important that you say, listen, I've been there. I've done that. This is a little bit of my story. This is what God can do through it. And
this is how long it took me to get there.
Right.
Yeah, be honest with that.
Right. And it's so freeing for you as a leader because you're not held to a standard that's impossible.
Yeah. So good. Well, those are the 5 things we would not do as spiritual leaders. What would you not do? And we'd love to hear from you. By the way, you can write us at info@hoperescue.org, info@hoperescue.org. Hope Rescue Podcast is listener supported. So if you'd love to support us, we'd love to receive that and use it well. We do most of our own work. We have volunteers now that help us. Funding has been a little slim.
Yeah.
But
times are hard in our economy.
But it's okay. You know, the Lord is providing. And if you would like to help, that would be great. Thank you for listening. And it's completely free, no obligation. Invite your friends to listen. Next week, Kimberly's going to share the 5 things she would never do as a spouse. And it's not going to only relate to just a spouse, being a spouse, but if you're in a romantic relationship, you'll learn these, or friendship. So I think it's going to be super relatable. Thank you for listening to Hope Rescue Podcast. We, again, are Tim and Kimberly. We're so grateful that you listened, and we'll be back next week. God bless you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.